Hello, I'm Jan Ślewiński. Welcome on board the Eastern Express. And as always, I hope you enjoy the journey. This time around, we're talking about Georgia's elections. But don't tune out yet, because this isn't just another boring election analysis. This is a drama of billionaires, power struggles, a very probable voter fraud, and the kind of international scandal that's shaping Georgia's future. So Georgia just held an election, and let's be honest, one of the likeliest outcomes was interference. And surprise, surprise, that is exactly what we got. It is unfortunate, it is familiar, and for Georgians it is critical. So without further ado, let's take a look at our latest report to find out more.
This is billionaire Bidzina Ivanishvili. And this is his Georgian dream coming true on election night last Saturday, with his party winning Georgia's parliamentary elections with a little over 54% of the vote. But according to independent observers, the dream becoming reality was fraught with irregularities. Marek Rząsa, the coordinator of the Polish Parliament's observer mission in Tbilisi and Bolnisi, has said that in every polling station in the Bolnisi region, both inside and outside the premises, there were operatives sent by the ruling party who made no efforts to hide that their role was to quote-unquote coordinate the elections.
Election days was generally procedurally well organized and administered in an orderly manner, but marked by a tense environment with frequent compromise on vote secrecy and several procedural inconsistencies, as well as report of intimidation and pressures on voters that negatively impacted public trust in the process.
The president of Georgia has said that the elections were directly influenced by Russia.
It was a total fraud and election rigging. We've never seen anything like it. We witnessed and fell victim of a Russian special operation, one of the new forms of hybrid war, which was carried out against our people, our country. We will stand together with the parties which protected our European future, the Georgian Charter.
The EU has voiced concerns over democratic backsliding in Georgia and called for alleged electoral irregularities to be investigated.
The EU expects the Georgian Central Election Commission and other relevant authorities to fulfill their duties, to swiftly, transparently and independently investigate and adjudicate electoral irregularities and allegations thereof.
But some find no fault in the contested election results. One such voice is Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orbán, who is set to kick off a two-day visit to Georgia, during which he'll hold a series of meetings with his counterpart Irakli Kobakidze. Orbán was the first foreign leader to congratulate the ruling pro-Russian party before any election results had ever been released. If the results of the Saturday elections are not challenged, Georgia may pivot into Russia's sphere of influence under the watchful eye of tycoon Ivanishvili, who sharply escalated his party's anti-liberal and anti-Western rhetoric in the run-up to the elections.
And now, as always, let's take a look at the issue in greater detail. This election was a crossroads where Georgia could choose a path towards either stronger democratic standards or a sort of democratic déjà vu with an authoritarian twist. But as it turned out, the choice was merely a facade. Now, why does this matter? Well, it affects not only Georgia's domestic future, but also its position on the international stage, whether it drifts toward Russia or leans west. In fact, for Georgia, this was supposed to be the election that finally clarified its foreign policy direction. But naturally, here we are with more uncertainty, more interference, and it seems fewer solutions. Now, over the past few months, we've seen a wave of polls that suggested the ruling party, Georgian Dream, was poised to win. Kind of. More votes than any of its rivals, but not enough to keep its firm hold on the parliamentary majority, which might make you think, oh, so maybe this time there is hope for a more representative, more democratic process. Well, bless your heart, that is adorable. Instead, we're getting reports of, and I'm quoting here, state resources being misused by the ruling party. And also instances of people's ID cards being taken away, like physically confiscated. This is election manipulation, Georgian style. Election observers have reported numerous irregularities, intimidation, breaches of voter confidentiality, and some extreme ballot box rigging. And while these observers have made it clear that they are not here to declare whether the election was stolen, their findings don't exactly scream democracy either. Which brings us to the man himself, billionaire and political godfather Bidzina Ivanishvili. Ivanishvili came to power back in 2012. This wasn't some folksy down with the people rise to power either. No, it was a full-blown pre-election coalition, but Ivanishvili bankrolled and dominated, wielding his massive fortune and influence to hold the coalition together. He was the coalition. A kind of Batman, if Batman could also maybe buy Gotham too. Ahead of the elections, there were polls that said the Georgian Dream would score as low as 32%. But let's get real here. While polling data might reflect people's dissatisfaction, it doesn't matter much in the election itself if the election is fundamentally compromised. So yes, polling matters until it doesn't. Because if you have ID cards mysteriously vanishing, what is the point? The fallout is brewing, and it is not likely to be quiet. Street protests are expected. International observers may choose not to recognize the results, and the Georgian Dream government, feeling the pressure, could respond rather ungracefully. And now here to shed more light on this story is our guest today, Grigoriu Lukhidze, Associate Professor at the Caucasus University. Hello and welcome to TVP World.
Good morning.
So it is a dark day for Georgia's democracy, but do you think this fight is over now that the Georgian Dream Party has claimed victory?
Even darker days ahead, in my opinion, first of all. I don't think that the fight is over because the political process has just started. I mean, the opposition forces have no intention until now to let's say, enter the Georgian parliament. Most likely in the near future, they will prepare a common statement in this regard and will inform the society about their intention to abandon the Georgian parliament. The same position has the president of Georgia, Salome Zurabishvili, who said that he's not going to recognize the outcomes of these elections. And we're approaching to the political crisis because the Georgian Dream is not able to form the constitutional majority, which means 100 seats out of 150. And apart from that, one of the most important issues in this regard is the assessment of the West and Western observers and international organizations. They have to provide us with their evaluation of these elections, and it will have a very big importance for the near future of Georgia.
Well, of course, as these processes go ahead, in the meantime, the Georgian Dream Party will be able to implement some of its election promises. Now, among these promises was the DeLegalisation of opposition parties. Do you think there is a risk that this may indeed happen, or was it just campaign rhetoric?
Right now, we see only silence from both sides. Silence before the hurricane. I don't know what intentions do opposition parties or the government have, but one thing is clear, that that's only the beginning of the process. On the one hand, the Georgian Dream promises to remove or almost all political actors and entities related and connected to the United Nations movement and fight so-called foreign agents, I mean, those international organizations or civil society organizations that operate on the territory of Georgia. And on the other hand, we see the intention to boycott an entire political process and stop any kind of communication with the government and the Georgian Dream by the opposition. But the most important thing, as I have mentioned, is the position of the West. if the West does not recognize the outcomes of these elections, I don't think that the level of legitimation, even among Georgians, of this government will be high or sufficient. Apart from that, if the elections are not recognized by the West, that's only the speculations. I don't know what's going to happen, but this non-recognition will be followed by serious sanctions, including the abolition of visa liberalization for Georgia and the stoppage of any kind of international aid to this Eastern European country, which will be devastating for the Georgian economy, because Georgia is not Iran, which is isolated but still has quite strong economy. And Georgia is not even Belarus, which is directly connected and attached to the Russian economy. And somehow they managed to survive these sanctions. But Georgia is not among strong economic players in the region. That's why darker days await us.
So you said that these institutions would need to make a stand on the issue, but what about the available evidence so far? How confident can we be that these elections were rigged by the Georgian Dream Party? Because, as you indicated, hearsay is not going to be enough. We need to have hard and fast proof that the processes of democracy were subverted and were perhaps also hijacked by a foreign power, specifically by Russia.
Yes, the task for the opposition and international observer missions. From my side, as an analyst of the region, I would say that the government has very effectively used administrative resource by blackmailing, frightening, or blackmailing or bribing a huge part of the state employees, those who are under the budget funding. And there are dozens of thousands of Georgians who work under the umbrella of the state budget, which means that they are very vulnerable to the blackmail of the government. Unfortunately, that's the Georgian tradition, even during the Saakashvili's government, even before. This part of the society was very vulnerable and easily blackmailed. That's why I would forward this question to international observers and politicians to prove. But one thing is clear, that the pre-election campaign was catastrophic, toxic, and the government used every resource it had or did not have in order to increase its support, even by bribing, as I have mentioned, blackmailing people.
So now, the international response is going to be crucial. So far, we don't really know what the European Union is going to decide. They merely expressed their concerns, and they said that the further analysis will be necessary. But we do have a few reactions from politicians and political leaders within the European Union. It's really interesting to see. On the one hand, you have Poland's Foreign Minister Radek Sikorski, who clearly emphasized that Europe needs to stand with Georgia in the light of the accusations of vote rigging, and a similar sentiment emanating from the Baltic states. So far, so good. However, we also do have one particular politician going on a limb to congratulate the Georgian Dream Party, and he did that even before the results were known. And of course, I assume that you know that we are referring here to Viktor Orban. What does it tell us about the state of the European Union? Because we need to remember Viktor Orban is now the prime minister of a country that is currently holding the presidency. Doesn't this weaken the response of the EU? And should it perhaps galvanize the actual authorities within the European Union, the Commission, the Council, to make a specific stand on the issue as soon as reasonably possible?
I don't think that the EU seems weak in the regard of Georgia, because we are quite well known and we are quite well aware of the position and modus operandi of Mr. Viktor Orban, who directly or indirectly serves Russian interests. That's not something new or innovative. But very carefully read the statements and tweets of various Western leaders, foreign ministers, senators, congressmen, European Parliament members, and their attitude and their evaluation is very negative. But I have an impression that quite correctly they're waiting, expecting the first evaluation of the international organizations. And after that, we have to wait. We have to be ready for further steps. And I assume that the further steps will be quite harsh and not very, let's say, promising for the actual government. But also I have to underline the issue that it is not the game where only the government will be hit by these sanctions. This is the most likely we have to expect the decisions and actions that will hit the Georgian citizens as well. And that's the saddest part of the story, but, quite understandable, that because that's the collective responsibility. And most likely in the near future, there will be harsh decisions, including the abolition of the visa liberalization for Georgia. Once again, if the election results are not recognized by the West.
What are the implications for the political landscape within Europe in general? We've already seen election interference playing out in Moldova. Now it was Georgia's turn. Do you think that Russia, even though it has a military which is underperforming in the field, actually has a trump card now in the form of its capacity to influence electoral processes within democratic countries? How big do you think is the threat, seeing that they have already been doing this, most likely, in two countries within the space of a couple of weeks, really?
They are sophisticated and effective in that. That's not something new. They managed to conduct successful operation even in the United States, even in stronger democratic countries, and I mean more potent states on the territory of the European Union. That's why my answer is positive. Yes, Russians are able to influence the results in Moldova. We saw it in Georgia, but still let's wait for the final assessment. But I find a lot of similarities in modus operandi of the pro-governmental propaganda and the Kremlin way of interpreting elections. And also you have not mentioned about the congratulation from Maria Zakharova, spokesperson of the MFA of Russia, who congratulated Georgians with the outcomes of the election. And only three, major politicians, I would call them, if we include Zakharova among politicians, congratulated the Georgian Dream. As you have mentioned, Viktor Orban, Nikol Pashinyan, the Prime Minister of Armenia, and Maria Zakharova, which once again illustrate how the things are going on.
And Nikol Pashinyan on this list is a very interesting mention, but perhaps this is something we might be able to explore at a different time. Grigor Yulukhidze was our guest today here on TVP World. Thank you very much for joining us and for sharing your insight. And now we're moving on to Eastern Newsflash, a series of all the other stories from the East that you really don't want to miss. Recognizing India's outstanding international clout, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky spoke of its Prime Minister Narendra Modi as a potential mediator between Kiev and Moscow. Here is the full story.
Zelensky said that Modi had the ability to bring an end to the Ukraine war and expressed hope for the possibility of peace talks being held in India. Finland, too, has joined the chorus of calls on New Delhi to use its international stature to pressure Russia for a change of its stance on Ukraine. Finland's foreign minister recently called on India to follow her country's suit and impose sanctions on Russia, something that New Delhi has not only refrained from doing, but has actually supported Russia's economy by purchasing discounted hydrocarbons. India also takes part in schemes to bypass sanctions through third-party trade arrangements. The need for peace is becoming especially urgent as winter approaches and Ukraine's energy infrastructure remains a target for Russian strikes.
Moving on now to Bulgaria, caught in the clutches of seemingly infinite streak of snap elections. The exit polls are out. The winners have been announced, but the country's political stability remains the main loser of Bulgaria's latest ballot.
The 7th in 4 years and still not yielding the desired results, if desired at all. Sunday's parliamentary election saw the centre-right GERB party coming out on top with 26% support. Regardless, the party fell short of a majority that would put an end to the country's political instability. Coming in second was the centrist anti-corruption We Continue the Change with almost 15%, while the pro-Russia ultranationalist Revival Party got close to 14%. The elections took place amidst a widespread feeling of apathy in the Bulgarian electorate. The public has grown more and more disillusioned with the prospect that Bulgaria will ever get a government capable of laying aside differences and taking the country out of political turmoil.
Elections, elections, elections. There has been plenty of them this year, some more democratic, others less so. This brings us to Uzbekistan, where a mixed electoral system was put to a test for the very first time in the country's history. Surprisingly or not, no opposition parties participated in the ballot.
The absence of opposition parties in the parliamentary and local council elections on Sunday was expected to result in a legislature supportive of President Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Recent constitutional reforms introducing procedural updates have not rendered Uzbek politics more democratic and freer from Mirziyoyev's sway. The parliament has rarely opposed legislation inked by the all-powerful president's administration. Now, under the new mixed electoral system, half of the 150 parliamentary seats will be filled through party votes, while the remaining 75 seats are to be allocated to individually elected candidates.
And that's all for now. Thank you for watching, and please stay with us here on TVP World for more latest news and updates.